Difference does not take away our ability to live as we want, but it does take away our ability to feel like we're normal while we do it. Because we read that these tax collectors and sinners were gathering around Jesus. And that kind of makes it sound like we're talking about a very specific group of those people that are here in this moment listening to Jesus. That is probably not primarily what the text is referring to here. A better translation is probably that these religious leaders began to see that tax collectors and sinners were being drawn to Jesus. Now, it's very possible that Jesus is very specifically eating with some of those people right now, likely even, that's the scene. But the way this is phrased, the concern from the religious leaders isn't the immediate audience with Jesus, it's the larger trend that they're observing around them. People, undesirable people, are being drawn to Jesus. And one or two, that was fine, but this is now changing the balance of our community. And that's when they begin to mutter to themselves. That's what Jesus overhears. That's worth reflecting on for a moment, I think. I think we're all okay with a little bit of change, a few unexpected people in our midst from time to time. When we start to get uncomfortable is when it starts to feel like maybe the balance is shifting around us. And this is actually a really interesting phenomenon called social validation that extends far beyond just religion. Often, we don't actually just want the ability to have our own beliefs and make our own choices and live our own lives. What we really want is to see those choices mirrored back to us by the people around us. And so one or two people, a few people that look different, that think different, that act different from us, that's fine. It actually helps us to reinforce that we are the norm. But if the balance even starts to feel like it's shifting, even if it's not anywhere close to a tipping point, but it feels like that could be an eventuality, once we feel like we're not normal anymore, that can be an incredibly destabilizing place. Because all of a sudden we have to ask ourselves some really uncomfortable questions. Would we really believe any of these things? Would we really act this way if it wasn't socially reinforced for us? So, for example, would the Pharisees keep to their hardline interpretations if there wasn't a community around that agreed with them? Would we keep to the welcome of Jesus if we found that out of step with our culture? And this is why in times of social upheaval, there can be a very strong preservation instinct that kicks in to rigidly enforce social norms. It's also why sometimes just the presence of difference around us can read like persecution to us. Difference does not take away our ability to live as we want, but it does take away our ability to feel like we're normal while we do it. And so it's very interesting to see here that in response to that discomfort, instead of giving them a technical answer, trying to exposit Scripture and explain how he interprets the law, instead of trying to meet that discomfort head on with facts, Jesus instead tells a very different type of story than we saw last week. One that's not rooted in reality, one that's rooted in what could be.